Which would you rather live in? This 200 square metre luxury London terraced house with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms and a 40 square metre kitchen? Or would you rather live in this? Now I can already hear you saying, well, obviously the plot of land, Chris. I would never pick that horrible terraced house. The plot of land is a way better pick. You'd have to be unwell to pick the terraced house. And I completely agree with you. The land, I mean, look at the potential. You could build anything here. Well, within reason, obviously, but it's a complete blank slate. And this is where tiny homes, tiny houses enters the conversation. I still have the piece of paper from 5 years ago when I was in this meeting and some fund managers talking about a load of numbers and I don't really know what's going on. And I started drawing potential floor plans for a tiny house. Now, some of you might be thinking, Chris, why would you be doing that? And well, it was around this time that I realized how truly miserable I was with my life, which doesn't really make sense because I had achieved one of my biggest dreams, and that was moving to London, getting a job in finance. On the surface, it looks like I'm winning, but the reality is I was hating every moment of it. Getting up at 6 in the morning, getting on the tube, standing on the tube for 40 minutes, then to arrive at an office and sit down at my desk at 8 a.m. and stare at screens until 6 p.m. And if the work wasn't boring enough, the superficial corporate BS conversations, I couldn't do it. I still can't believe I lasted as long as I did in that industry. And then the thing that I really hated was the fact that I was spending more time with colleagues per week than with the people in my life that I actually care about and that I actually want to be spending my time with. But how does this link to designing a tiny house? A tiny house is anything that's under 37 square meters. And when I was drawing the footprint, I drew a rectangle that was 10 meters by 3 meters, giving a footprint of 30 square meters. Now that sounds like quite a decent space, but the thing is when you start putting internal walls into the house, that's obviously going to reduce that footprint. There's certain things that have very standard sizes, like your sink, like a toilet, a shower, your kitchen. And when I started thinking how the floor plan could work, I asked myself the question, what is it that I actually need? Like truly, I want you to do this. Next time you're bored at work, just open notes on your phone and write down exactly what it is you need in your life. The bare minimum. I'm not talking about the things you want. What is it that just to exist you really need? And it's a bit weird because for me, the list wasn't very long. All I needed was a roof, somewhere that's warm, got water, electricity, a decent sized bedroom, decent sized bathroom, and then a majority of the space, I really wanted that to be the living room. The kitchen area, I'm no chef. I practically live off chicken goujons and broccoli. All I need is a small sink, an induction hob, a small oven, extractor fan, and a fridge. And is there anything I'm missing? Yeah, I'm lazy, so a dishwasher I would probably want as well. That is all I really needed for the kitchen. And then honestly, a majority of my time is spent either at a table on my laptop or on a sofa watching TV. Now this weighing up of the things that I really need and then the things that I just want, that are just nice to have, it also made me have basically a midlife crisis in my 20s. It made me start questioning everything. How was it that I was spending £12,000 a year on rent, which at the time was a 1-bedroom apartment? How does that make any sense? That total amount of rent for the year could buy all the materials to create that apartment. How is it that I'm spending that every single year? So that made me start thinking, wait, why am I living in London? Oh, it's for this job. All of the banks are in the financial district. And that then got me thinking, well, am I actually wanting to live in London, or am I paying a fortune to just live where I work Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday are the days where I have the freedom to do what I want? But it's not really that true, because Sunday at about midday I started getting a fear that the weekend's almost over. Then I started feeling negative, and then by Monday morning the cycle would repeat itself. I really started to question absolutely everything. And around this time, I really wanted to just run away. I had this idea that if I maxed out every single one of my credit cards and then just disappeared into the wilderness, if the banks could ever catch up with me, and it turns out they probably could. So plan A was a no-go. Plan B is the plan that I stuck to for years, and that was spend every waking moment outside of my day job, every evening, every morning before work, my lunch break, at work, my weekends, the 27 days annual leave, every moment spent chasing a dream, a vision, whatever you call it, of creating a business that could make me more money than my day job, so I could eventually leave that day job. Now, this is the unfortunate, harsh reality of life. Everything costs money. Taxed on the income you earn, then you're buying products and services that you're taxed when you're paying the tax money on the tax, that taxing tax. Every single thing costs money. All the fun activities that we all like to do, money is somehow involved with it. If you want to have time, well, there is a price on that, depending on what you do. If you downsize your life, you can really upsize your life at the same time. Now, what I mean by that is, well, the UK average house costs £290,000, which has an average floor plan square metre of 76 square metres. So a huge sum of money for a not particularly big house. When you compare this tiny house that I'm building is 30 square meters. Now, at this point, probably some of you are thinking, how much does the tiny house cost to build? And honestly, I have an idea, but I don't really know. I'm kind of figuring that out as I go along. Now, land will really depend on where you are in England, and that is a massive topic, and I'll probably have to do a 40-minute video on that alone. I'm really trying to stick to my plan. That is, if I'm going to go for a different sort of life to 99% of people, and you stray a bit away from the norm, you're not buying a semi-detached house in a cul-de-sac. Instead, I'm trying to build my own tiny house completely by myself to save as much money, and the end result will be under half the UK average house square meter. I need to make it feel pretty special to kind of counter the negatives that probably arise from me going down this route. Now, before I get into the negatives, what are the positives? Well, cash. You don't need a hell of a lot of it. I really do think this is going to cost just over 20 grand for me to build the entire thing, and that is because I'm probably going to go a little bit over the top with some of the fixtures and finishes, because this is my forever house. This entire project I'm paying for entirely in cash, and the reason for this is, for once in my life, I just want to own something outright. I don't want to have a house that is 91% owned by a bank and I'm only owning 9% of it. Forever, I've been paying rent, mortgages, and to just not have that financial stress every single month that, well, if I don't pay this amount of money, I'm not going to have a roof over my head. I've been daydreaming of what that must feel like, and I'm quickly approaching that feeling. So I'll give you a proper update of what that kind of feels like in the future, because I think it's going to be unbelievable. The fact that my only bills to sit still in this tiny house is going to be council tax, electricity, water, and it's got a septic tank, so I'll need that pumped I don't actually know how often that will need pumping, but there will be a cost for that. Now, I am expecting the electricity bill for this place to be virtually zero, because it is a tiny house. That means by investing a little bit more money than normal in insulation, I should be able to heat the house just with a wood burning stove, which I just bought. It's a pretty unique one. It's a corner wood burning stove. Now, it had a little bit of damage on it, which I complained about because I was a little bit annoyed, and it turns out it was the only one in England. So I actually managed to get a decent amount of money off of it, which is great. But also, the fuel that goes in a wood burner is wood, and that is free around me because I am surrounded by a forest. And I was chatting to one of my neighbours, and I said to him, if there's any fallen branches or anything, can I borrow them and burn them? And he said, yeah, sure, I don't care. So my thought is every day when I go for a walk around the woods, I can just take a bag with me and borrow branches that have fallen from the trees, and then I don't even have to pay to heat the house. Now, I am definitely forgetting to chat about something. Oh yeah, this was technically a very good financial decision, because obviously reducing my cost of living, giving myself a little bit of protection. So if my business one day tanks, I've still got a house to live in, and all I've got to do is cover council tax, electricity, water. And you might be thinking, well, you got to also buy food and fuel. And that is true. I spend a lot more money on fuel than food. I'd be interested to know how much you lot spend on food, because I only ever eat once a day, and that's when I can remember. So that will vary from either 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. And then I eat quite a big meal, and then I drink coffee from the moment I wake up all through the day, which turns out that's what a lot of Mediterranean people do. And caffeine suppresses your hunger, therefore you don't eat as much. And if you're not eating as much, you don't spend as much money. And I've been doing that for years. And yesterday I went to Waitrose, did my weekly food shop, and it came to 55 quid. And 25 quid of that was coffee. Now, obviously, if you've got a family, that's going to cost you a lot more, obviously. And also, if you're wondering how I spend so little, is I always go at the end of the day, and there's so many reduced stuff in Waitrose. And I really do think sell-by dates are a little bit of a myth, because I eat stuff way past its sell-by date, and I'm fine. Well, am I? That's questionable. I really don't see myself ever changing from this mentality, because I just don't like spending more than I have to on certain things. Except for on cars, I can really see how that's going to get problematic in the future. But if I'm keeping my living costs low and downsizing my life, that means that I'll have more money to buy cars, and cars are happiness, and jet skis and motocross bikes. I've lived in a studio apartment, and then the London project, that was a big house. And guess what? I take up exactly the same amount of space in each one. I sit on a sofa, I stand in a kitchen, and then I sit at a table. The only difference from going from a big house to a small house is in the big house, it takes you longer to walk from one place to the next. And I've got some friends who now live in unbelievably big houses, and it's actually hilarious how long it takes to walk from some parts of their house to the other. And I understand why they've made those decisions, because obviously if you're buying an expensive house, you've got the potential to be exposed to the property market in quite a big way. For example, if the market goes up 10% on a £100,000 house, you're going to make £10,000. If it was on a £10 million house, it's £1 million. The potential increase could be, or vice versa, it could go the other way. And obviously with a tiny house, well, that's going to be a lot smaller amount of money, and therefore the exposure to the property market is going to be a lot less. Now, this is possibly the most important part of this video. I've had so many people who aren't my friends, but people I know, who when they say, oh, you're moving into a tiny house, aren't you? And you can kind of see it in their eye. They're like, what are you doing? Like, why would you move from London in that house to a tiny house? It just doesn't make sense to them. And that's the beauty of it, is it doesn't have to make sense to anybody. If it makes sense to you, you're one decision away from a completely different life. And for me, it took a number of years to create the setup. It doesn't mean that it will take you a few years. It could take you less. You could have more money saved than me. You could already have your own business. For most people, already have a house, and the thing that's getting in the way of them living their dream life is they've just got to sell that house and cash out that equity they've got in it. There's a super famous story of a Greek fisherman who is on a beach. He's got his wife, his 2 kids there. They've got a bag with some salads and desserts. The kids are laughing. His wife is chatting to him as he casts a single line out into the sea with the aim to catch enough fish so they can eat that evening. As the sun is starting to set, they've caught 2 fish and they're cooking them on the barbecue, when a local businessman walks over and says, you're not going to catch very many fish with just 1 fishing rod. You should get 2. The Greek fisherman's response was, well, what will my reward be then? The businessman said, well, then you'd be catching more fish, so you're going to have a surplus. And then that extra fish you can then go and sell at a market, and then you could make some money. The Greek fisherman's response was, well, what will my reward be then? The businessman goes, well, with that extra money, you could start employing people to do the fishing for you. And then you could be catching more and therefore be selling more fish at the local market. The Greek fisherman said, well, what will my reward be then? The businessman started to get a little bit annoyed and was like, well, how can you not understand? This is how you grow a business. Eventually, you could save up enough money that you could put a deposit on a bank loan to buy a fishing boat. And then instead of fishing from lines, you could have nets and you could be catching way more fish. And then you could be taking this fish and selling it at international markets. You would then be making an absolute fortune. The Greek fisherman said, well, what will my reward be then? The businessman at this point is getting pretty irritated, by the fisherman and said, how can you be so stupid? You'd be making so much money. You would have so much freedom. You could be sat here on the beach right now with not a care in the world. To which the Greek fisherman's response was, how is that any different to what I am doing right now? He's catching exactly what he needs to eat every single day. He's spending his time with the people he cares about, and he has not missed a single sunset. You see, I've heard probably 4 different versions of that same story, and I think about it very often, to the point that it actually starts impacting my decisions. 2 weeks before I left my day job, I got approached by somebody who works very high up in a particular investment bank in London. And he said, I'm going to be opening this job role. I'm going to have to advertise it for HR purposes, but if you turn up for the interview, you will get the job. The money was great, and the plan that was set out would be probably for the next 3 years, I would go from already being miserable working in finance to being probably even more miserable working in finance, but my bank account would be pretty happy from that decision. I walked to this building that's in the city of London. I think it's one of the buildings that remained from the fire of London. And basically that was my lunch break office. I'd go there pretty much every single day and just work on my business for an hour every single lunch. So I went there as normal at 1 o'clock, sat down on my bench, and I called my brother and I told him what I'd just been offered. And he said, that is brilliant. That's amazing. What are you going to do? And I remember saying, they could add a 0 to that number and I'd still say no. And I think that's when you know that you have to pursue and chase your dream, your vision that's going on in your head. Is even if you got offered the most unbelievable amount of money, if that doesn't deviate you from your plan at all, I think that's when you know that the plan is what you really want to be doing. And then this gets into the whole world of, even if tomorrow you had way more money in your bank account, you are still you. Nothing really changes once you've taken care of the bare minimums. And now, obviously, the other part of my brain's going, well, a lot would change. Straight away, I'd spend 3.9 million on an O'Keen 80-foot yacht, 2.9 million on a 2013 Koenigsegg Agera. And only recently I realized you can buy plant equipment on Auto Trader. So I've been looking at a lot of excavators that were previously used for quarrying that cost like £400,000. And I don't have any need for that excavator. I just really, really want one. But that's the thing. They're all the things that I want, none of which I need. What I need is time spent doing what I want to do. What I need is a bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom, a roof that protects you from the weather. I'm pretty sure this is all Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something. And we all have a different set of needs. For example, you could be a single parent with 2 kids. You could be a husband and wife with no kids. Everyone's got a completely different situation. Everyone's got a different set of skills that they have from their experience working at their job. There's always a pivot. There's always something you can do. Like I say, you're one decision away from a different life. Now, I know there's people who love their 9 to 5, so I've always got to be careful because I'm very passionate about being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, all of that stuff. And it turns out there's 19% of people in full-time employment actually enjoy their job. But I can't focus on the minority. I need to focus on the majority. And that's 81% of people on a study that was done on 1 billion people in full-time employment. 81% turned up to a day job for no other reason than money. Now, in total, to get it to this stage, the tiny house structure has cost £1,200 in skylights, and those are 2x1 meter skylights. If you're wondering where I get them from, it's just whatever's got the best discount on eBay stores. The timber cost for every single thing you see, all the stud walls, the OSB, the 2 layers of plywood that is in the warm deck roof, the frame, the floor joist, the ceiling joist, all of that has cost me so far £3,700 in timber. Now you might be thinking, oh, when did you buy that timber? The prices now are so expensive. How could you possibly? I haggle, I call up every single time. The price to somebody who just goes into a builder's merchant and just goes add to basket, you're looking at more like £7,000-8,000 for all of this. Just call up and ask someone for the best price. The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody says no. Remember, if you don't ask, you don't get. And seriously, just look at that already. That's £3,000 in savings. That's made those skylights completely free just from haggling. That's also meant that those £2,000 private gates are also completely free just from the money that I saved on the timber. There is also another cost that doesn't really ever get mentioned in these sorts of videos, And that is because, well, it's very dependent on what sort of stock and tools you have. But in total, if I just look at how much I've spent at Screwfix and Toolstation on just random tools that I've needed, buying the membrane to protect the roof before I put the EPDM on it. And that just reminded me, I forgot to say that all of the EPDM stuff, that was all around the £1,000 mark for the roof, including the patches and the lap sealant. But at Screwfix and Toolstation combined, I'm at around the 500 quid for that. So seriously, have a real think about everything I've just spoken about. You got a head on your shoulders, feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in whichever direction you choose. Is that how the saying goes? Remember, feeling motivated, that's going to last 24 hours. That's going to disappear. Creating a vision of your dream life is what kept me going for years. And now I am living it. Of course I have worries. Of course I get stressed about things. It's not all great. There's definitely negatives of it. And even with building this tiny house, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I really don't. I don't know how much it's all going to truly cost. But that is why I'm documenting everything. So when you guys do this, you've got somebody who shared their entire experience of going down this route. So let's see how this goes. If you don't mind, please like the video, subscribe. It really helps support the channel. And also, if you could share this to maybe a friend, that would double its exposure. And I also need to say thank you to everybody who supported the last video. I still can't believe how many people have watched that. And as always, I will see you next Thursday.